And for those of you that are just tuning in, just going to wait another couple of minutes for people to connect. All right, guess I'll get things started here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This is part of our RunSignUp webinar series 301. This is going to be about the sponsor platform. My name is Ryan Snell. I'm a software developer here at RunSignUp. So let's go over the agenda for what we're going to cover. So today we're just going to really just take a look at the sponsor tab of the RunSignUp race dashboard, and in doing so, we're going to cover the process to add a sponsor to your race, setting up various sponsor levels, recording sponsor donations, so you can manage that, invoicing your sponsors so that they can get an email, they can pay online, or they can pay by check, advanced management features for sponsors, as well as some sponsor analytics that you can provide back to the sponsors so that you have information for them so that you can actually say, hey, you guys had this many views or whatnot for your sponsors. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So if there's any point during this webinar that you have any questions, just feel free to write them in this little questions pane, and then we'll go through them at the end. So I'm going to bring up the RunSignUp race dashboard, and we'll take a look. All right, so I'm just going to go into one of my test races, and I'll go into my awesome race. So if none of you guys have seen, there's a sponsors tab on the left side for the dashboard, and you can use this to access all the various features related to sponsor management. And so there's 4 sub-tabs here. There's Manage, and there's Setup, Financial, and Report. We're going to take a look at the Manage tab here. So I'm just going to delete this. And so we'll start with a clean slate, much like if you didn't have a sponsor set up initially. And before I dig into here, I just want to give a background. So previously, I mean, we've had sponsors as part of the RunSignUp race dashboard for a very long time, for several years, but previously it was just the ability to upload a logo and maybe a simple link. There really weren't too many features surrounding sponsors, and we do realize that races have plenty of sponsors, plenty of races have sponsors, obviously. So we felt like there's a need to sort of explore this space and give race directors more features surrounding sponsors and the ability to manage them, so you don't have to use Excel sheets or things just to keep track of which sponsors are going to be sponsoring your race for each year. So we're going to start with adding a sponsor. I'm just going to click this link to add my first sponsor. So the bare minimum to add a sponsor is just the name and the logo. That's all you need. So I'm going to start with Pete's Blinds. Using some fake company names here. And I have a logo, so we're just going to use that. And you have the ability to set other information, such as a URL, so put that in. I have no idea where that goes. And we'll put in a description here. We have a nice what you see is what you get editor, so you can do various formatting here. And there's some other information down here that we'll explore a little bit later. But as I said before, the bare minimum for adding a sponsor, all you need is just the name and the logo. So we have both of those, so we'll add our sponsor. So as you can see, now Pete's Blinds appears in our RunSignUp sponsor management page. And there's various actions we can take for this sponsor now. And I'll show you what happens when you add a sponsor to your race page. So if I open the race page up, now down here under the race contact info section, you'll see that there's a sponsors section on the race page. And as I said before, this is something that's been around for a while. So this functionality really hasn't changed too much, but it is very important because here you can actually see when you're registering for the race, there's more visibility for that sponsor for all the participants online, in addition to anything else you might have at the event. Like let's say you have a t-shirt that has sponsors on the back of it or something. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but the content of this will actually be on your RunSignUp confirmation emails as well. And so now that the sponsor is added, you can, as I said before, you can take some other actions for that sponsor. So we'll take a look at some of the other fields that are on here. So there's a few fields that control your sponsor, such as the sponsor level, and we'll get into that with the setup. Whether or not they're committed. So we have a few commitment statuses here: not committed, tentatively committed, and committed. By default, when you add a sponsor, we assign them tentatively committed. We believe that you have expressed intention to show this sponsor, but we don't know if they're committed or not, so we'll let the race director determine that or not. And this is more just a flag for them, for you guys to really use to see whether or not your sponsors are fully committed or not. So if you think that they'll be added, you could add them here and then change their status to committed later. We also maintain your payment status, so there's a flag here, and you can check that on or off depending on whether or not they're paid, or whether or not they've paid. And if you have contact information, you can list this here, that we don't have post-it notes all over the place trying to keep track of that. So if I have John Doe, john@example.com, I'll just save that information here. And now that information is saved. So this is really useful if you just don't really know too much about, or if you don't feel like keeping track of all that information, you can store that here. And then there's another field down here on whether or not you want to hide that sponsor. And so some of those fields are visible here. If the sponsor is truly committed, they're paid, ideally you would want all three of these badges to be green. So the first one is whether or not they're visible. By default, when you add a sponsor, it's going to be visible. So that's why it's visible. If for some reason you want to hide the sponsor, all you have to do is check this button here and hit save. and now they would be hidden. So if I were to go to the race page, refresh that, Pete's blinds is no longer on the race page, but we like Pete's blinds, so we're going to make them visible. The next field is the commitment status, as I said before, and you can edit these fields either on this page or on the edit page, because if you have 50 or so sponsors, sometimes it's really helpful just to be able to go down here and edit them all on one page rather than having to flip back and forth. So you can edit the commitment status. They're committed, so we'll save that. And we'll leave them as unpaid for now. So the next step, really the next major piece to setting up your sponsors is going to be levels. Not all races have levels, but some do. Let's say you have a gold level or a silver level or a platinum, things like that. Some races get really creative with that stuff, which is great. So I have one in here. I'm just going to clean that out. So let's start with a gold level. And we'll say that that level is 500. This dollar amount is not publicly visible to the race page. This is just more for internal notes, as well as if you wanted to invite sponsors to create their sponsor later, they will want to know this information if they're trying to set up a sponsor, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And from here, again, you can use the what you see is what you get editor to really try to add some formatting and make this pretty. And if you have a cap for, let's say you only have one title sponsor or something like that, you could put that there. We'll leave that as blank for now, though. So we have a gold level set up now. But let's say you had 2 or 3. So you can come back in here later and just click Add a Level. And we'll set up a silver and a bronze level. So we'll say the silver is $250. We'll say that they receive placement on the back of t-shirts. And bronze level will be $100. So the bronze, let's say we'll give them placement on the race information page. And so we'll save this page. So now we have our sponsor levels set up. And so you can flip back and forth if, let's say, you add your sponsors and you don't know what your sponsor levels are, or let's say you know your sponsor levels, but you really don't have any sponsors yet. You can go back and forth, and it works seamlessly. So let's go back to the Manage page, and we'll say that Pete's Blinds is a gold sponsor. So we'll just change the sponsor level from here, from none to gold. So now Pete's Blinds is now a gold level sponsor at $500. And that's pretty much it for the sponsor levels aspect. Really, it's just a lightweight way to categorize your sponsors and provide placement for them. If for some reason your sponsor levels were out of order, let's say there was a title sponsor here, so all the way to the bottom, and there were 1,000. There's only one of them. Well, now they're all the way at the bottom, but you probably want the title to be at the top, and then it would go from title to gold to silver to bronze. But we didn't set it up that way. So there's a way to fix that. All you have to do is just go to the Manage page and scroll to the bottom. There's this button for editing the sponsor order. And apparently you have to go add a sponsor under there. So we'll add another sponsor here. So we have James and Sons Building Contractors, and currently they're not categorized to a sponsor level. But let's say they're the title sponsor. So all we're going to do is we're going to hit Edit, and we'll change that to Title Sponsor. So they're title sponsor, but the order here just is not correct. So all we have to do is just go down to Edit Sponsor Order. We'll just drag Title Sponsor above Gold level, save Sponsor Order, and now Title Sponsor is in the right place. It's all the way at the top. Now let's take a look at some of the other fields in here. So we have the unpaid field. So let's dig into that. So under Manage, there's this Payments tab. So if you click on that, you'll get access to it's basically a financial summary just for this sponsor. It's very lightweight. This is not meant to replace any sort of accounting software that maybe your race is using. This is really just a way for you to keep track of it so that you're not using Excel or something else. So Pete's Blinds has not paid. But let's say we want to create an invoice and try to get them to pay. So if you click on, and again, just we're going through this, all you have to do is click on Manage from the Sponsors tab, and then we're going to click on Payments here. So we're just going to create an invoice here. At the minimum, all you need is a bill to email and the invoice amount. And so we're going to say that it's $500. We're going to ask that payment be received by July, let's say July 14th, 2017. And the sponsor will pay the processing fee. There's various options here. There's three options. You can either choose for the race to pay the processing fee, or that you'll split it, or that the sponsor will pay the processing fee. And we'll say that the sponsor should be marked as paid once the payment is received. And in order to create a sponsor invoice, you just have to create this, you have to type in invoice details here. So we're just going to say thanks for sponsoring our event. And we'll create an invoice here. We should get an email about this sponsor invoice. Let's refresh here. So now I got an email here, and this is what the sponsor would get in their inbox. So it says the following sponsor invoice is due for the My Awesome Race, and it has the bill to information, the amount, when it's due, and what sponsor, as well as the invoice details that you provided. And we also brand it with your race logo and the sponsor logo. So there's a nice call to action here to pay the invoice. So all the sponsor would have to do is click on this, and then some of this information is pre-filled if they're a RunSignUp user. And they just have to type in their credit card information, and then the payment would be processed, and you receive that payment like you normally receive your registration funds. But I'm not going to pay that bill right now. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a payment. So this might be an option for if you had a check or cash or some other way of being paid that was not online. Some people prefer to pay invoices online. Some people might prefer to pay it via check. So if you had a payment of $500, all you have to do is type in the amount. We'll say that they're paid. Let's say it was a check, and we knew it was check number 241. All you have to do is click Record Payment. And now it shows that they are paid, which is great. And we have the payment here that we just typed in, as well as this invoice that we just created. So now if we flip back to the Manage page, you'll see that this, this paid is now green. And we'll say that they're committed, hit save, now they're in the green. And you can repeat this process for other vendors or sponsors as well. So let's just say $500, check. Again, that payment is now listed here. Now both sponsors are now in green completely, indicating that they are showing on the race page, and they are paid, and they are fully committed to sponsoring your event. There's a couple other things you can do. There's this offers feature in the RunSignUp sponsor platform. So this allows sponsors to go and, let's say they have a coupon or some other sort of incentive to try to get you to come to their business and spend some money. That's where this offers functionality is pretty cool. So let's say there's a coupon for Pete's Blinds. So we'll just click on offer from the manage page. We'll see you get 10% off your purchase. So the minimum here is just to create a name, a description, and that's it. But we have a coupon image, so we'll attach that here. So they get 10% off their purchase, minimum $100. And there's a couple other options here. You can set the offer URL, and you can set whether or not the sponsor offer is included in race registration confirmation emails. By default, that is not turned on, but you have the ability to. We'll click that. And then you have the option to turn that on to the public. If this is not checked, then this will show for participants that have registered if they're logged in to RunSignUp. Otherwise, no one else can see it. But if you check this, then anyone can see it. So we're going to click Add Sponsor Offer here. That image will upload. And if we go back into the offer page, see that the offer image now exists and all this information has been saved. So just to show how that happens when you get a confirmation email, this will be good to see how these sponsor images, sponsor logos come into the confirmation email as well as any sponsor offers that were set up. I'm just going to resend this confirmation email to myself. And so now we see that in the race registration confirmation email, in addition to all the other information that's typically there, now we see this coupon for Pete's Blinds, 10% off your purchase. The image is embedded into the content of the email, so runners can actually see that. It's very visible, as well as the sponsors that were set up for the race. Those are down there as well. So just a couple other things we want to cover here. Just notes and access. So notes is a lightweight way to go and add some information. Let's say you knew that Bob will be handling, or let's say I'll be contacting him. So now we have this recorded here, and the note that I just had is here. We'll see that Bob will be contacting them to thank them for sponsoring the event. And we record some system messages as well, and these are primarily any changes that were made to the sponsor. This is more or less an audit trail as well for any information that got changed. You also have the ability to add a document here. So let's say you have a contract or something and you want to record that. You can do that here. And then you can also show IP addresses or hide system-generated notes under visibility options down here. So another tab down here is going to be access. And so there's a couple of ways to actually, let's go to invite here. There's a couple of ways to try to get sponsors to set up sponsors on their own. So in addition to you, the race director, being able to create these sponsorships and on the sponsor platform here, you can also invite sponsors to create them on their own. So we're going to invite myself to go as a sponsor. So I'll send myself an invitation. The two methods are email address or link. So I just invited myself via email. The other option is to generate a shareable link. So all you have to do is click that button, and now you have this link. This link can be shared. If I pop that open, here's the page to go create a sponsor. So a sponsor would have to create a RunSignUp account if they don't have one and process the sponsorship. I'm already logged in. And so here it shows all the sponsorship levels listed out. So you have the gold level, the silver, the bronze. Title is no longer available because there's a cap on that. And in your email, if they received it via email, they would get this link as well. Sometimes it's nice to try to be able to offload uploading the logo and all of the information. Let's say you want them to create the description, you could do that. And there's also other ways to invite them to access the sponsorship as well. So if we knew that, if we knew James and Son's email address, we could type that in. I'll type in mine. And we'll invite them access to this sponsor. So we successfully sent a sponsor invitation to ryan@runsignup.com, me. And here they would get an email. And it says that you've been invited to edit the sponsorship details. So again, this would allow them to go in and really type in a full description of their sponsor. So we'll accept that invitation. And I get this nice page with their logo. And so now down here, I have access to edit the sponsor information. And so this is in their profile. So if they hit my sponsors when they're logged in, there's an edit sponsor and an add offer. So here we can edit the sponsorship details, as well as the name, the URL, or the logo. There's a couple other things I want to cover here. So we've gone over levels, we've gone over the Manage tab. Display tab gives you some other options. Let's say you wanted to show the sponsors on the right column. We have various different placement methods. You can show it on the left column underneath the navigation on the race page. You can show it on the right column. It's the right column with scrolling, and the bottom of all pages. We'll choose the right column of all pages. You also have the option to display sponsor levels on the race information page. By default, that's checked. Some people might not want that. I'm going to turn this off because otherwise you would have the sponsors in the content and on the column. I just want them on the column, so I'm going to uncheck that. That's down there. And then you have the sponsor level display, which is whether or not you actually want to list them out by level. So if you just want them all to be one list, you would uncheck that, you could check this, and then you would actually have it being broken down by title, gold, silver, and bronze. And if your race has different wording for a sponsor or offer, you can customize that here as well. So now with those display settings, now the sponsors are no longer here, but they are here on the column. And these would still show up on the confirmation email as well. There's a couple other tabs for financials. This is more or less a summary overall for all the sponsors for any payments or invoices that you've received. So this is another way to give some insight into that. And then we provide a report down here for, it's just a table for all the information for your sponsors. It has their sponsor logo, it has the sponsor name, level, contact information, commitment, whether or not they've paid, visibility, as well as the number of views. You can download it as a CSV if you like. And so another cool thing that I want to cover before we wrap up and go to the questions and answers is the integration of some of the analytics stuff that we've been working on. So one of the first things that we introduced for analytics was sponsor logo view tracking. So I'm going to pop open another race here so we can take a look. So what happens when you go to a race page is in the background, we actually record that all these sponsor logos have received a view. And we tally that up to provide insight back to you, the race directors, so that you can go back to your sponsors and say, hey, look, because you've sponsored my race, I put your logo on our website, and you received 63,000 views, or whatever the number is. Just another number to really impress them and to add value to that sponsorship. So I'm going to take a look at the here. So this race was just renewed from 2017 for 2018, so the numbers are a little low, but you can see that the views are tallied up here. And because Lockhouse Coffee was the photo sponsor, they had a watermark on all the photos. Their view count is higher than all the other ones, which are all the same, but theirs has roughly twice the number. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover here. I'd like to open up for questions and answers. If you have any questions, you can type them in using the tool. So I'm just going to go through some of these. So Andy had a good question. The sponsor description of the setup, is that text information something that's publicly viewable, or is it more of a notes section for the race director? So that's, it can be, you can always use it as notes, but it is public. And so when you add a sponsor, we create this sponsors tab here on the left. And so this breaks it down by the sponsor level, and it provides some more information for the sponsor, so you can view them. So the sponsor details that we added before, they're here. And some other information is there as well, such as the sponsor offer information. So when there's an offer, we provide more of a highlighted call to action here, view offer. And so that coupon is here. And we also create a sponsor page for that sponsor as well. So they can go and more easily print this page out and bring it to the store for their 10% off. So another question, do only the logos for the committed sponsors appear on the race page? The committed sponsors doesn't affect the visibility. So there's 3 badges here on the Manage tab, and just go pop that open here. So there's visible, committed, and paid. Visible really is the determinator of whether or not they're actually being shown or not. Committed is more or less just an internal status just for the race directors to see whether or not they've actually committed or not. And so we have a couple questions on the processing fees. Those are our normal invoicing fees, and I believe that should be a flat 6%. I want to double check on that number though. Yeah, I'll have to double check on that number. I'm not completely sure, but it does follow the normal invoicing structure. Going through some of these questions here. Is there a way to send sponsors a link for race registrations that are included with their sponsorship? Currently, you can't do that with the sponsor platform, but you could use something like reserved entries or another feature to go more or less do that, serve that purpose. You can walk through that with your account manager if you want. So another question. So we have sponsors that donate advertisement or water, not money. Is there a way to record, track that, and run sign-up? So you don't have to actually type in that they paid $500 or $1,000. If you want to mark that you actually got the water or something, what you could do is you could just mark them as paid. We don't force anything to happen on our site. Like we don't force them to submit all their payment through the RunSignUp invoicing platform. You could give them via check, via cash, or if you have water, bagels, or coffee, you could just mark them as paid, and that would work just fine. Can the sponsor list be printed out? So there's a sponsor report here, so you can print this out. You can also download it as a CSV, and then you can open it up in Excel and do any other manipulations in there, or print it out from Excel, or numbers, or any other spreadsheeting program you have on your computer. So is a sponsor view recorded when someone visits the home page, even if they don't scroll down to the sponsor section? Currently, yes. It's more or less an impression. So it shows that they visited the page and the page had sponsors. It's a little complex to try to figure out whether or not they actually viewed it or not. It's whether or not the sponsor was shown on the page. So I believe those are all the questions. So I'm going to wrap things up. We will send this out as well if you missed the first few minutes or so after the webinar. So thank you all for attending. If you haven't gotten on the list, there's a big button on RunSignUp.com to sign up for more of these webinars. There's a big blue button, sign up for a webinar. Yeah. Thanks all.